I drove up to my parents' house, mentally preparing for another family dinner, imagining in advance how I would come up with a polite but evasive excuse if the conversation again went in a direction that was unpleasant to me, because despite regular meetings lately filled with deliberate warmth and feigned ease, I felt that familiar, inexpressible tension inside me every time, which, oddly enough, became almost tangible as soon as I was on the porch of their house, and every time I wondered, why is it so difficult for me to be myself here, surrounded by those who seem to know me best? And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Lara, and at the age of 32, I was able to build the very life that many consider a dream: independence, a good job, a decent salary, an apartment in the center, the opportunity to travel whenever they want, and all this became possible thanks to my hard work, perseverance, and refusal to follow other people's expectations, especially those that they were so carefully and subtly woven into my family's conversations, disguised as caring or light jokes. I work as a software development manager for a small but promising technology company, and although working days are often long and exhausting, satisfaction with the results of my work and recognition from colleagues more than compensate for any temporary inconvenience. However, here, on the threshold of my parents' house, all my achievements for some reason became ephemeral, as if insignificant, as if my every step outside the usual scenario of family life was perceived as something strange, almost condemned. When I got to the front door, I could already hear an unimaginable noise, the chaos created by children's voices, stomps, screams, and laughter, and I immediately realized that the children of Emma, my older sister, were already in full charge, as usual, left to themselves. Emma is 35, married to Diego, a man with a perpetually tired expression and a phone that seems to be glued to his palm. They have 2 children, Leonardo, a restless 7-year-old tomboy with imagination and energy for 3, and Mia, a 5-year-old princess who can turn any relatively calm space into chaos with a whim. They are, of course, lovely children, don't get me wrong, but they are wild, unpredictable, and seem to have absolutely no sense of boundaries, especially in a house where, in Emma's opinion, the so-called natural upbringing should reign, by which she apparently means a complete lack of restrictions. Leonardo brushed past me, grazing my shoulder, and I barely stood on my feet. Aunt Paula immediately shouted at him, not hiding her irritation, but the boy had already disappeared around the bend. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to stay calm, even though a light, irritated pulse was already boiling in my chest. "Maybe we should slow down a little." At that moment, Emma came out of the kitchen, dressed up, as if she wasn't going to dinner at her parents' house, but at least for an evening reception. A dark blue cocktail dress emphasized her figure. Her hair was styled with salon neatness, and her makeup was so flawless that I reflexively touched my face, feeling how casual I looked on her background. She just casually waved her hand at the children and shouted, "Children, be careful," but her voice did not sound like a command, but like a phrase said for show, without the slightest confidence that she would be obeyed. "Hey, sis," she said, coming closer, and I was about to reply, but instead I couldn't help but ask, "Wow, you look great." "And on what occasion?" My hugs were short but sincere. She just smiled mysteriously, her eyes sparkled, but there was evasiveness in her words. It can't be that, I thought, girls don't dress up to shine for no reason. As I walked into the living room, I glanced at Diego. As expected, he was lying on the couch, looking at something on his phone, and without taking his eyes off the screen, he lazily muttered, "Hi, Lara." At that moment, Mom rushed out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and looked like she had just barely coped with a panic attack. Meanwhile, Dad was setting the table, and although his movements were quick, there was a certain absent-mindedness in them, as if his thoughts were wandering somewhere far from the current moment. "Hi, honey," he said, kissing me on the cheek and immediately returning to the cutlery without asking a single question, which in itself was unusual. I felt a wave of anxiety rising inside. My parents were clearly behaving strangely, not as usual. Emma, as if she had stepped out of a glossy magazine cover, Diego, who, as it seemed to me, surreptitiously exchanged glances with her, filled with some hidden meaning, and the general fuss, too nervous, as if not accidental. I sat down at the table, looking around at what was happening, trying to catch the details. The way Mom dropped the serving spoon and shuddered, the way Dad kept clearing his throat, the way Emma nervously straightened her dress, peering at her reflection in the decorative mirror, as if trying to convince herself of her own irresistibility. When the food was finally served, Mom's signature stew with a thick aroma of herbs and spices, which always gathered everyone at the table, no one was in a hurry to talk. I tried to start a conversation, ask a couple of familiar questions, but the answers were short and scattered, as if all the thoughts of those present were far beyond this room. Emma and Diego exchanged glances again, this time a little longer, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were up to something. The children, oddly enough, were the only ones who behaved as expected, making a mess, dropping spoons, smearing dessert on the table and completely ignoring all the comments. When the store-bought cheesecake was served, not even put on one of my mother's porcelain plates, I was finally convinced that something was clearly happening, something that no one was preparing me for. Dad suddenly cleared his throat loudly and, drawing attention, said in a low voice, "Before anyone left, your mom and I have an important announcement." Emma immediately straightened up, straightening her dress. Diego hugged her, and the children continued to chew, not paying the slightest attention. Dad turned to Mom and said softly, "Won't you bring the folder?" Mom immediately jumped up and hurried into the office, as if she knew in advance that this moment would come right now, as if she was ready for it, as if she had mentally replayed this episode many times, imagining how restrainedly and with dignity she would hold out that manila folder, symbolizing not just a legal formality, but a decision that, as it seemed to her, she and her father accepted wisely and fairly. She returned quickly, held the folder in both hands like something fragile, and placed it on the table with the care with which one places a family heirloom or the last piece of a birthday cake in front of a guest, for which they are fighting with their eyes. My stomach clenched painfully, as if everything inside was clutching into a tight knot, foreshadowing that this gesture would be followed by something that could turn everything upside down. What's happening? I asked myself, trying not to panic. I glanced at Emma, and despite her carefully put-on mask of restraint, I noticed a tremor in her fingers, with which she nervously twisted her wedding ring, a sign that she always gave out in moments of great excitement. She and Diego clearly knew what was going to be said, and that knowledge made their silence even louder. Mom took a deep breath, her eyes ran over the faces, stayed on mine longer than on the others, before she began to speak in a voice that trembled slightly, as if it was really hard for her to pronounce these words, although there was a well-rehearsed gentleness in it. "Your father and I visited our lawyer last week," she began, pausing briefly to let the words settle in the air. "We were thinking about the future. At our age, it's important that everything is in order." The Pope, who was sitting to her right, nodded solemnly, as if confirming not just the fact, but the importance of this event, as an act preceding modern times. "We have made a new will." I felt my heartbeat quicken, each flash of it seemed to be pounding in my temples, driving one simple realization there: that's it. This explained the formal tone of the dinner, the nervous fuss, Emma's outfit, and everything else. But then why were Emma and Diego sitting so calmly, as if they already knew everything? Mom continued, her voice now a strange mix of apologetic tenderness and determination. "We decided that this house and everything in it would go to Emma." The words hit me in the stomach like a cold wave on a January sea, and for a second I was speechless. I sat stunned, clenching my fists under the table, while Emma, who had begun theatrically wiping away non-existent tears, said in a voice cracked with excitement, "Mom, Dad, I do not know what I have done to deserve such an honor." These words, filled with false modesty, brought me out of my stupor. I looked at her as if she were a stranger, trying to figure out where the point was, after which everything rolled into this abyss of absurdity. What has she done to deserve this? I didn't realize I'd said it out loud, and my voice sounded sharper than I'd expected. I'd like to know that too. What exactly did Emma do to deserve all this? I waved my hand around the living room, the walls, the photographs, the furniture, the books, the shelves where my children's crafts, old school diplomas, and family albums stood. The house that I've been paying for the last 3 years to keep in the family. I remembered everything crystal clear. That desperate call from my parents 3 years ago. My mother's sobs on the phone, her voice full of fear. Laura, we may lose the house. The bank is threatening to withdraw. We cannot cope. The medical bills after their father's knee surgery, the debts snowballing, the fear they couldn't face in the future. When I suggested that they turn to Emma for help, they abruptly refused. She has 2 children. She's already at her limit. I agreed then, without hesitation, without haggling, putting aside my dreams of buying my own apartment. I started paying off the mortgage, $2,400 a month, plus utilities, plus expenses when the car broke down, when the water heater leaked, when the roof needed to be replaced. And all this time, Emma and her family have been here, constantly, endlessly, like shadows, like guests who forgot to leave. They used this house as their own, ate at this table, spent the night in these walls, without offering a penny or help, even the simplest, like washing dishes after dinner. And now all this is for her? My parents' faces turned pink and filled with indignation as they pondered my question. Silence fell in the room, broken only by the giggles of Leonardo and Mia, who continued to play with the remains of the cheesecake, unaware that their relatives were sitting on the edge of an emotional abyss. How dare you? Mom finally spoke, her voice low, restrained, dangerous. After all we've done for you. Dad slammed his palm on the table. The clatter of dishes disrupted the illusion of order. You had to help us, Laura. That's what daughters do. And we have every right to leave our property to whomever we deem necessary. I sat there in disbelief. I must. That's how they took my translations. Not as a sacrifice, not as a gesture of love, not as a help in a difficult moment, but as something due. And then, with icy clarity, I realized, for them, I'm just a convenient daughter, a financial resource. You know what? Emma interjected, without tears anymore. Her voice was dry, saturated with contempt. I didn't expect you to be so greedy, Laura. You're acting like a gold digger. Diego, who had been silent until now, nodded, making a worried face that made me want to splash water on him. It's easy for you, Emma continued, her voice now dripping with hypocrisy like thick syrup. You're alone. You don't have any children. You don't know what it's like to raise 2 people and invest every cent in their future. Some of us have real responsibilities. I looked around the table and their faces. Each of them seemed alien, distant, as if I were looking at strangers who had come to play their pre-learned roles in a farce called family. My parents looked at me with undisguised anger, and in that anger there was no pain, no attempt to understand, not an ounce of doubt, just condemnation and righteous indignation, as if I had violated an ancient rule, desecrated a shrine they had created in their own image. Emma, on the other hand, had a triumphant grin that she didn't even try to hide anymore. The corners of her lips lifted with such self-satisfaction that I could almost hear her inside exulting, confident in her own victory, as if all these years she had been waging some kind of war with me, and now the long-awaited triumph. Diego looked smug, lounging in an armchair as if this was already his home, and probably mentally calculating how much they could get for this house if they decided to sell it immediately after his parents, perhaps, would move to a more comfortable place, which he would be happy to help them find. It was the last straw, not what they decided, not what they were hiding, but their expressions, absolute confidence in their rightness, without shame, without apologies. Without saying a word, I got up from the table, feeling a wave of dull rage rise in me, calm, almost icy, the kind that comes not in a rush, but afterward as a consequence, as the final realization that everything you believed in no longer exists. I went to the guest room, where I left my purse and jacket, grabbed my things with a sharp, practiced movement, as if I was afraid to stay there for another second longer, and headed for the front door without turning around, without saying a word, ignoring the shouts of my parents behind me. I got into the car, slammed the door shut, and as soon as the engine started purring, I drove out of the yard, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I drove about 5 miles, not noticing the road, not hearing the music turned on by inertia, until I realized that I couldn't see anymore, Tears blurred my vision. My heart was squeezed so hard, as if someone was squeezing it with an icy hand. I parked at the curb, turned off the ignition, and just sat there, sobbing, sobs that shook my whole body, uncontrollably, long pent up, accumulated over the years. 3 years. For 3 years, I helped them, not out of compulsion, not because I had to, but because I loved them, because I thought it was necessary, that they would appreciate, understand, and be grateful. For 3 years, I said no to vacations, postponed buying my own home, refused invitations to cocktails with colleagues, because every dollar in my budget was calculated, every move on the bill was checked, everything was for the sake of their peace of mind. And now it turns out that all this time they didn't see me as a person, but as an ATM. After crying for what seemed like an eternity, I turned the ignition back on, but I was shaking so hard with anger that I had to turn into the nearest convenience store. I ordered the strongest tea they had and sat in a corner booth, pressing myself against the cool glass, hoping it would cool my throbbing anger. When I finally got to my apartment, it was after midnight. I was exhausted, but my thoughts wouldn't let me rest. My body refused to fall asleep until my mind calmed down. I brewed mint tea, sat down at my laptop and logged into the banking application, something I had avoided doing all these years because I was afraid to see the naked truth, exactly how much money had gone to a place where it would never return. I created a spreadsheet and started typing in the numbers, line by line, every month, every transfer. Mortgage payments, $2,400 per month. 36 months. $86,400. Then utilities, water, light, gas, internet. Car repair. A new water heater. The property taxes that I covered last year when they said they just couldn't afford to pay. The final amount is $13,782. More than $100,000, given without looking back, without conditions, without expecting anything in return, to people who, as it turned out, did not even have the decency to say thank you. I looked at the next scheduled payment, which was due in 2 weeks. With a feeling of both emptiness and strange freedom, I pressed the cancel button. Then I blocked their phone numbers, knowing that I didn't want to hear any excuses, requests, or reproaches. I drank tea, took a hot shower, letting the water wash away this pain, this resentment, this burden of other people's expectations, and went to bed, for the first time in many years not thinking about anyone but myself. The next 2 weeks were like a breath of fresh air, blissful silence, not a single call from Mom with her Larachka, "We have a problem again," not a single message from Emma with her eternal "I'm busy with the kids right now, could you stop by Mom's?" Just silence. Rest. A space where I could breathe again. I threw myself into my work, and when my boss dropped it between meetings, "Do you know how hard it is to get people to take a vacation?" I didn't hesitate to ask for 2 weeks. She smiled. "You're late, Lara. You haven't had a day off in 3 years." That same night, I booked a trip to Florida, a hotel on the beach, car rental, no plans, no responsibilities, just me and the sound of the surf. It was my first real vacation in so many years, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The day before the flight, while looking through the list of things, making sure that I would not forget my charger, swimsuit, and sunscreen, I heard the vibration of my phone. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I unblocked her number a week ago, not out of forgiveness, no, I just wanted to know if something serious really happened. I ignored the call. She called again and again. Then Dad started calling. Then Emma. As if on command, as if someone had given a signal, "Now we're pushing." It was relentless. After about 20 calls, I finally picked up the phone, and as soon as I heard my mother's voice, I immediately regretted my decision. Her scream came so sharply that it seemed to me as if it cut through the very air. "Where's the money?" she shouted, not even bothering to greet me, not asking how I was, not showing a drop of the care that they so like to declare when it's profitable. "Yesterday we had to pay the mortgage, and the bank called us." "You haven't transferred the money." I couldn't help but let out a short, Surprised laugh, not cheerful, but bitter, full of amazement at how far their arrogance had gone, how confidently they continued to pretend that nothing had changed. What's so funny? Mom demanded, clearly annoyed by my laughter, which must have seemed mocking to her. This is serious, Lara. You need to send the money right now. I took a deep breath, restraining my growing irritation, and, still laughing in disbelief, I said, let's get this straight. You leave the house to Emma in your will, but you expect me to keep paying for it. Are you serious? Is this not a joke? Mom didn't answer right away, but there was almost panic in her next cry. We could lose the house. It's not my problem anymore, I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded, how firmly I was standing on my feet, as if I had suddenly thrown off everything that had been dragging me down for so long. The house belongs to Emma now, so let her pay for it. Mom screamed, how can you be so selfish? After all we've done for you? It's your family duty, Lara. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Not like that, I replied. I owe it to myself to stop letting you take advantage of me. Emma gets a house, Emma can pay off the mortgage. I didn't wait for an answer. I finished and hung up. Then, with surprising determination, I turned off my phone completely, went to my suitcase, closed it, checked everything on the list and went to bed early, knowing that tomorrow morning my first real vacation in so many years begins, and I will not allow myself to face it tired and exhausted. The next morning, I boarded my flight to Florida with a lighter heart than I had felt in years. There was no usual oppressive feeling that I had forgotten something, that I owed someone something. There was no bitterness from the fact that my desires were postponed again for the sake of someone else's comfort. For 2 glorious weeks, I was going to think only about the sun, ocean waves, and which book to read next. The Florida sun turned out to be exactly what I needed, warm, enveloping. It seemed to penetrate into my bones, pulling out of me the fatigue that had accumulated over the years. I checked into a hotel on the coast, threw my suitcase on a wide bed with snow-white linens and immediately changed into a swimsuit. An hour after landing, I was already burrowing my feet into the hot, fluffy sand, feeling it pleasantly tickle my skin, and holding a fruit drink with pineapple slices and mint in my hand, enjoying a rare moment of absolute peace for me. But as it turned out, my family wasn't ready to let me enjoy that peace. My phone continued to vibrate with messages and calls, and although I stubbornly ignored them at first, some part of me stupid, accustomed to waiting for trouble, wanted to know what they were saying. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You know what's going to happen, but you can't look away. Mom wrote, the bank called again. We need this money right now. Dad added, your mom is very upset. Call us immediately. Emma, of course, kept up. How could you do this to our parents? They will lose their home. When her messages went unanswered, the tone became tougher. I have 2 children. I can't afford a mortgage. You have to pay it off. It's your responsibility. That last one made me laugh out loud, a harsh, sincere laugh that startled a couple on the deck chairs nearby. I looked at the screen with their words and no longer felt any pain or guilt, just amazement at the scale of their selfishness. I blocked them all out again and focused on my rest. For the next few days, I lived the life I had been denying myself for more than 3 years. I swam in the ocean until my fingers turned blue, went on a sunset cruise, ate in good restaurants without looking at the bill, and slept as much as I wanted, without alarms, without schedules. I took selfies on the beach and at the sites, posted them on social media, for the first time in a long time, just because I wanted to share the joy. And that, as it turned out, was a big mistake. On the 4th day of the vacation, comments started appearing. At first they were almost restrained, but they quickly crossed the line. Mom wrote under the sunset photo, how can you enjoy yourself when you know that we are about to lose our home? So cruel. Emma echoed, it must be nice not to have any responsibilities while your family is suffering. I hope you're proud of yourself. Even Diego joined in, your sister cries every night worrying about her parents, but please enjoy your selfish vacation. I looked at these comments, feeling a wave of emotions rise inside me again, but this time not pain, not shame, but fatigue. I'm tired of being the villain in their story, tired of being the one who can always be blamed, who can be blamed for responsibilities that no one else wants to bear. So I took one of my favorite photos, against the background of an orange-pink sunset, where I smile sincerely, truly, for the first time in many years, and signed it simply, without malice, without pricks, but with the truth. The first vacation in 3 years, the years I spent paying my parents $2,400 per month for a mortgage. That's where the real hell started. As soon as my post started gaining views, as if someone had turned on a siren at the very heart of our family drama, relatives with whom I hadn't spoken in years, and who hadn't bothered to call, wish me a happy birthday, or just find out how I was, suddenly began to show unprecedented activity who, some wrote publicly, others sent private messages that expressed more curiosity than sympathy, as if they were just waiting for someone to break the silence and give them a new reason to discuss. My cousin Alicia, whom I remember from summer trips to visit my grandmother as a child, wrote me a personal message. What do you think about paying the mortgage to your parents? I just want to understand what's going on. She had never been interested in my affairs before, but now, judging by her tone, she wanted to find out as much as possible. Aunt Linda, whose existence I remembered only from holiday cards, did not write directly, but soon after Alicia's message I received a notification. I was removed from the family WhatsApp group. That's interesting. Of course, I wasn't surprised, but I still couldn't contain my inner irritation at how casually and without explanation I was cut out of the circle to which I had so long and faithfully belonged. I texted Alicia again and asked what was going on in the group, and a few minutes later she sent me screenshots, which, despite all my preparation for the worst, still hit my heart. My mother posted a long, pathetic message in the group, framed as a confession and a plea at the same time. Our daughter Lara left us in a difficult moment. After all we had done for her, nurturing her, supporting her, helping her become who she was, she turned her back on us out of jealousy for her sister. We could lose our home because of her cruelty. Please pray for us during this difficult time. My blood started to boil. They not only twisted the facts, but also played the victim so convincingly that I realized that if I didn't tell the truth, I would remain the villain in this story forever. I went to my social media page, opened a new message, and, pressing my fingers on the keyboard, typed in a post that was supposed to finally put everything in its place. I need to clarify the situation. 3 years ago, my parents called me and informed me that they were in serious financial trouble and that they might lose their home. I intervened, and since then I've been paying off their mortgage, $2,400 a month, plus utility bills and unforeseen expenses. In total, I transferred more than $100,000 to them so that they could stay in their house. Last month, my parents announced that they were leaving the house to my sister in their will. When I asked about the justice of this decision, I was told that I was obligated to help them as a daughter. Now they expect me to keep paying for a house that will never be mine. I love my parents, but I won't let them use me as an ATM anymore. I attached screenshots of transfers, bank statements, letters confirming my payments, everything that could prove my case. The evidence was indisputable. The reaction was almost instantaneous. My feed was filled with comments, most of which were unexpectedly supportive. I had no idea, Lara, they wrote to me. Your parents said that Emma helped them. This is outrageous. Others wrote, you're strong. They took advantage of you. You did the right thing by setting boundaries. And even those who usually remain neutral spoke out, you deserve peace. Don't let them drag you into this again. Mom and Emma tried to intervene. They left angry comments, claiming that I was lying, that the money was a gift, a manifestation of my love, and not related to the mortgage, that my calculations were distorted. But no one listened to them. The family saw the truth. The screenshots were exhaustive. After this emotional explosion, when all the cards were laid out on the table, I felt a strange emptiness, not destructive, but cleansing. I didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. I logged into my accounts and unsubscribed from my parents, Emma, and even my aunts, who were silent as long as it was convenient for them. I blocked their profiles, turned off my phone, and decided to really disconnect before the end of the vacation. The remaining days in Florida were the most peaceful of my life. I read books under the rustle of the waves, skydived over the azure surface, went to the Everglades, and for the first time in a long time began to think about the future with a real, slight excitement. $2,400 a month, which no longer went anywhere, could have been the beginning of something new, my own house, my own life, in which I am finally the mistress. When my vacation came to an end and I flew home, I felt really rested, with a clear head and an unexpectedly light soul. I was wheeling my suitcase down the hallway of my apartment building when the concierge, Miguel, always polite, stopped me at the elevator. "Miss Lara," he said, "your parents came by yesterday. They asked if you had returned from vacation." My heart skipped a beat. They came here. On my doorstep. They tried to set up an ambush, knowing that I could come back at any moment. "Thanks for letting me know, Miguel," I replied calmly. "If they come back, please don't let them through. I don't want to see them." He nodded sympathetically. "Understood, Miss Lara. I will inform the other concierges as well." For the next few weeks, I immersed myself in my work, with that desire for solitude and concentration that comes when a person finally regains control of their own life, when they no longer need to look around, explain themselves, sacrifice themselves for the sake of other people's expectations. I spent long hours in the office, enjoying immersing myself in projects that had previously seemed burdensome to me, but now suddenly opened up from a new perspective, as an opportunity to grow, create, and be myself. For the first time in many years, I started saving significant amounts every month, and the sense of security that these savings brought was truly intoxicating, as if for the first time in my life I was building something that truly belongs to me. I met with a financial advisor, a dry but attentive middle-aged man, who helped me draw up a clear and achievable savings plan for a down payment on my own housing. His confidence, restrained and businesslike, instilled calmness in me, and when we calculated that in a year I would be able to afford a modest but cozy apartment in an area that I had always liked, I felt a warm, lively sense of hope blossom inside. Everything that previously seemed like a distant dream has now become a very real goal. I began to communicate more, to return to the life from which I had been isolated for so long. I joined a tour group that brought together people of different ages and professions every week to walk along city trails, go on small trips, and share stories over a cup of coffee. I started accepting invitations to Friday night get-togethers with colleagues I had always refused before, citing business or fatigue, but now I felt that I had earned the right to joy, to simple pleasures. Life has really become wonderful. So one evening, about 2 months after that memorable dinner, which became the point of no return, I left the office building, holding a folder with printed schedules in my hands, and, as always, headed to my car in the parking lot. But as I got closer, I noticed familiar silhouettes. My parents were standing by the car. My stomach instantly cramped, as if someone had punched me in the gut. My body remembered that pain faster than my mind had time to comprehend what was happening. But to my surprise, I kept my composure. She came up, stopped at a safe distance, and calmly, almost emotionlessly asked, "What do you want?" Mom looked exhausted, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes hung loosely on her, as if she had stopped taking care of herself a long time ago. Dad seemed to have aged 10 years, his shoulders were slumped, and his eyes were dull. Mom took a step forward, her hands trembling, her fingers clenching and unclenching. "Lara, please. We need to talk." Her voice was quiet, but there was tension in it, as if every word was coming with an effort. "We made a mistake." "We talked." She turned to her father, as if seeking his support, and he nodded. "We are ready to change the will. We can do everything fairly. We'll split it between you and Emma. Just, please, help us with the mortgage again." I couldn't help myself. I burst out laughing, short, sharp and bitter. It was so transparent, so predictable, that it didn't even seem tragic, it was just funny. So that's why you're here. You still want my money. Dad hurriedly spoke up. No, Lara, it's not like that. We are truly sorry. I looked him straight in the eye. Sorry? Or is it a pity that your ATM stopped working? I asked coldly. Mom's face wrinkled in pain. How can you be so cold? We raised you. I raised my eyebrows. And then they used it. For 3 years, I've been paying your bills, while Emma has done absolutely nothing. And then you decided to leave everything to her. And now you're here only because you need money again. Mom raised her voice, and there was real desperation in it. We can't pay the mortgage. The bank is threatening to confiscate it. I shrugged my shoulders. That's Emma's problem, as far as I'm concerned. The house goes to her according to her will. Let him figure it out. She can't help. Mom screamed, no longer holding back her tears. She has children to take care of. I shook my head, and at that moment, something snapped inside of me. You know, I don't care anymore. Emma is 35. Her children go to school. Nothing prevents her from finding a job and helping you. But no. I'll cut her off. I've had enough. I've spent over $100,000 on you. This money could have been used for my house, for my future, and you didn't even say thank you like a human being. Mom burst into tears out loud, as if she were playing to the audience, and indeed, several of my colleagues, who were leaving the parking lot at that moment, began to turn around and look curiously. But now I knew this tactic all too well. Tears were just another form of manipulation. I hope you and Emma can figure something out, I said, opening the car door. Maybe you'll find a second job. That's what people do when they can't pay their bills. It's all your fault. Mom screamed, but I slammed the door before I heard the end of the sentence. She started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot and, taking one last look in the mirror, saw them standing there, Mom still screaming, and Dad, drooping, trying to calm her down. I felt neither anger nor guilt. Just relief. 6 months have passed since then. I keep my word. Not a single dollar, not the slightest involvement. According to Alicia, the only relative I still keep in touch with, despite the desperate attempts of my parents and Emma to turn the whole family against me, the situation began to change. My parents found a part-time job, my dad works at a hardware store on weekends, and my mom got an administrative position at a dental clinic, 3 days a week. Not luxurious, not easy, but enough to make at least some mortgage payments. Emma, as expected, does not help financially. She's too busy telling anyone who's willing to listen what a cruel and ungrateful daughter I am, how I abandoned my aging parents out of some stupid jealousy. Most of her relatives don't believe her anymore, especially after the screenshots and my explanations. But she still doesn't give up. She continues. As for me, I'm doing better than ever, and this is not just a routine phrase that is uttered out of politeness in response to a routine question, but a deep, heartfelt confession, backed by months of inner work, rejection of old patterns and steps towards myself. After I finally resolutely blocked this endless financial drain that was undermining my freedom and peace of mind, I managed to accumulate almost $20,000, an amount that until recently seemed mythical, unattainable, but now lay in my account, tangible and real, as a symbol of my independence and a new beginning. My financial advisor, a discreet and precise person, but who has already become something of an ally in my little war for control of my own life, confirmed with satisfaction that I will be able to be ready to buy my own home within the next 6 months, much earlier than we initially expected. This news filled me not only with joy, but also with that special feeling of triumph that comes when, despite all the circumstances, you choose yourself and win. I've also started dating again. So far everything is very easy, non-committal, but it's surprisingly pleasant to just have dinner in good company or go to the movies without feeling the usual pang of guilt for spending money, without replaying scenarios in my head in which the next payment for the parental mortgage ruins all my plans. I returned to those simple pleasures that for years I considered unattainable or unnecessary. I joined a book club where novels that used to gather dust on my shelf are discussed every week, and I went to yoga classes, allowing myself the luxury of physical and spiritual balance that I had denied myself for so long for the sake of other people's needs. And so, last month, quite unexpectedly, at the local grocery store, where I just ran in to buy something for dinner, I ran into Emma. It had to happen sooner or later, considering how small our city is, and how often the paths of even those who had been trying to avoid each other for a long time cross here. She was with Leonardo and Mia. The children have grown noticeably since the last time I saw them. They noticed me first. Leonardo froze, as if he wasn't sure if it was okay to run up, but Mia, as soon as she recognized me, screamed and, laughing, rushed to me, hugging my legs. And Paula. She screamed, confusing me with our aunt, as she often did before. We miss you. I couldn't help but smile, and I sat down next to her and whispered, I miss you too, baby. Emma approached cautiously, as if afraid that I would make a scene or say something harsh. Her face was tense, her eyes darting. Kids, let's go. We're in a hurry, she said in a tone that sounded both impatient and awkward. But before she took them away, she stopped, looked at me and, almost without raising her head, muttered, Mom and Dad are fighting. You know, it's hard for them. They are exhausted by these jobs. I looked at her intently. It's hard. You can always help them. She looked away, blushing. I need to support the children. I didn't argue. She just turned around and went back to her basket. Goodbye, Emma. When they left, I continued shopping with a strange sense of peace. 6 months ago, such a meeting would have turned into an internal hurricane for me, pain, anger, tears. But now everything was different. I felt detached, like an observer of someone else's family drama, to which I no longer belong. That evening, I was sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a soft blanket, with a glass of dry wine in my hand, and idly looking through real estate listings on my laptop. One of them especially caught my attention, a cozy one-bedroom apartment near my office, with a large balcony and a view of the park. It's just been put up for sale. I made a note to call my realtor in the morning. My phone vibrated. A message from Alicia. Family dinner at Grandma's this Sunday. She specifically asked me to invite you. Emma and your parents won't be there. I smiled. I'd love to come, I replied. It's been a long, hard journey, realizing that family isn't always what you want it to be. Sometimes, those who should love you the most turn out to be the ones who will be the first to take advantage of your generosity and blame you for rejecting. It was a painful but necessary lesson. I don't hate my parents or my sister. I let go of the anger that burned inside me after that fateful dinner. Now I just feel sorry for them. It is a pity that they failed to see the value of what was given to them. It's a pity that their greed, bias, and inability to be grateful cost them a daughter who could do anything for them if they were just being fair. But I'm not sorry that I left. It was the healthiest, most necessary decision of my life. When I closed my laptop and looked up at the night sky, where a few stars were blinking in serene silence, I felt grateful for the first time in a long time. Gratitude for the clarity that comes only with distance. My parents wanted an ATM, not my daughter. Emma wanted a scapegoat, not a sister. And I wanted a family that would appreciate me. We don't always get what we want. But sometimes, when we let go of something that hurts, we find something much more. I'll call the realtor about that apartment tomorrow. Next week I will have dinner with my relatives, who still treat me with respect, without demands and manipulations. And every day, step by step, I will continue to build the life I want, free, real, mine. And you know, it feels like it's worth more than any inheritance that could ever be. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.